Hello Raptors fans, and welcome to Raptors Report. The Raptors have been on the upswing in a wide-open Eastern Conference, and we'll take a look at the reasons why. And as the season marches on, we're getting closer and closer to seeing what the final rotation is going to look like, as players over and underperform expectations. There's lots to talk about, so let's jump right in. The Toronto Raptors played 3 games at the end of October against some, less than stellar competition, and then kicked November off with a fantastic win against one of the hottest teams in the NBA, the New York Knicks. The Raptors' 5-game win streak has come to an end, but I think that the Raptors have impressed fans and outsiders alike with their strong play. Let's break down the games to see how the Raptors have been winning. Firstly, we'll revisit the Raptors' defense. The Raptors have the 7th best defense in the league, which is not surprising. They've also eked their way up to 14th in the league on offense, which is a bit surprising. Behind those larger stats are the more explanatory ones. The Raptors are still number 1 in the league in offensive rebounding, they're number 1 in the league in steals, and number 9 in the league in limiting turnovers. What does that mean? More possessions. Just like I said last episode, the Raptors are still shooting the ball 10 more times than their opponents are, and that's absolutely crazy. One major reason is because of the excellent defensive efforts of Gary Trent Jr., who leads the league in steals, as well as OG Anunoby, a fantastic on-ball defender, and Fred VanVleet, who leads the league in deflections. Throw on top of that the defensive versatility of Scottie Barnes, and it's pretty easy to see why the Raptors are one of the top teams in that department. One thing that springs out every time you watch the Raptors is how aggressive they are at attacking offenses. I've mentioned switching and helping a lot in other videos, and that's definitely an element to their success, but Nurse's game plan is to force turnovers. Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet are constantly up and into opposing ball handlers, swiping at the ball and, frankly, gambling for steals. In most defensive systems, this is a big no-no because a bad gamble can let an opposing ball handler get a free lane towards the basket. The Raptors, on the other hand, as I've mentioned before, do not mind helping. If our on-ball defender gambles for a steal and loses, the Raptors will send help and then enter recovery mode, where they try to close out on shooters. One thing to note that I think is helping the Raptors is that the refs are kind of swallowing their whistles this season. Normally, aggressive defenses would draw a lot of fouls, as you're reaching in, swiping, maybe even bodying your opponent. There has been a point of emphasis to avoid calling fouls on players who hunt for them, like jumping into defenders who are too close, falling over when a player steals the ball, etc. It seems like refs are a little stingier, and the Raptors might be the ones who are rewarded for that. Through 8 games, the Raptors are in the top half of the league in terms of fouls committed, which is honestly probably right where you want to be. Fouling is often correlated with defensive effort. You'll often pick up a foul if you're really going at your opponent hard, but too many fouls and you'll start to give your opponents free points. 13th seems like a decent, if spooky, place to be in terms of fouls. I'll end this section just by throwing some praise at the Raptors for the awesome effort during the win streak. They've really taken it to their opponents, with the Knicks win being the cherry on top. With Scottie injured, I didn't have a lot of confidence in the Raptors' offense, but heroic efforts from OG and Gary Trent Jr. in particular let them overcome the 5-1 Knicks in MSG. Love it. Next, let's talk how the rotation is shaking out, because there's been lots of fluctuation in terms of minutes, as well as some surprising performances, both good and bad. Firstly, we'll talk about Dalano Banton. People in my comment section are screaming for some Banton discussion, and I totally get it. The hometown kid is making waves and playing a very unique, pleasing style of basketball. One thing that has to be mentioned is that Banton's minutes have come at the expense of Goran Dragic, who has been completely buried on the bench since Banton's emergence. I foolishly believed that Dragic would give the Raptors a scoring boost, but with his offense slow to start the season and his defense clearly hurting the Raptors, he's been banished from the rotation in favor of the 6'9" Torontonian spark plug. Since receiving a minutes bump, Banton has averaged 6.5 points on 55% shooting, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and a steal in just 16 minutes per game. But really, the stats do not tell the whole story. Banton is a great defender who fits perfectly into the Raptors' switching help defensive scheme, able to guard ball handlers on the perimeter, as well as drop low into the post to provide help around the basket and grab rebounds. He's also dynamite in transition. He's extremely fast with the ball in his hands and has a very tight handle for a player his size. Scottie Barnes is the better overall prospect, but Scottie's ball handling is still a bit raw, especially when compared to Banton, who has all the tricks you would expect from a lead guard, with an array of behind-the-back dribbles, crossovers, hesitation moves, and he has a great idea of how to change pace to catch defenders off guard. At 6'9" and only 21 years old, he's a very unique and intriguing prospect. Raptors scouting for the win. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. A few episodes ago, I heaped praise upon the Raptors' prize acquisition from the Lowry trade, forward center Precious Achiuwa. Well, his fantastic production during the preseason has not carried over to the regular season, and that's an understatement. Precious has an abysmal true shooting percentage of 38% and is turning the ball over like crazy. He's also hogging the ball with an infuriating propensity for doing fake dribble handoffs, where the guard assumes they're going to get the ball back, but psych! Precious keeps the ball and then bricks or even airballs a layup. Now listen, Precious is only 22 years old and there's plenty of runway in his still young career. The problem with font size 500 quotation marks is that the Raptors are a competitive team this year. They have goals and aspirations that go beyond developing talent. In the New York game, Precious started the first half, but played terribly. Khem Birch started the second half, and it was like a breath of fresh air. One thing I love about Khem is that he sets proper, maybe even borderline illegal screens. Precious could learn a thing or two from Khem, as he's guilty of occasionally setting rather unsubstantial screens. Khem, on the other hand, sets very, very solid screens that give the ball handler a lot of space. He also makes great reads in the short roll. He has an effective floater and is usually in the right spot defensively. For the time being, I think that Khem has earned the starting center position. The team looks more comfortable when he's playing, and he doesn't waste a lot of possessions offensively. It's a long season, and it's possible for things to turn around for Precious, but right now he's hurting the Raptors. He's still good at switching onto smaller players defensively, and he is a good rebounder, but a bench role where he hones his overall game might be best for both him and the team. We'll see. And that's this week's episode. I'm sure you've been impressed by the Raptors, but is there anything that stood out to you? Do you have any thoughts on the evolving rotation? Let me know here in the comment section or on Twitter @RapsReport. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video, as that helps the channel. And as always, thanks for watching Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.